following is a special presentation of WKRG News 5. Hurricanes, nature's largest and most powerful storm. They cannot be controlled, their paths cannot be predicted with complete certainty. Relentless wind and rising water can be deadly. 25 years ago, Hurricane Frederic hit the Gulf Coast hard. The wind and rain pounded the coast throughout the night. Sunrise brought the realization that while the damage was tremendous, most had survived. People caught in the path of the hurricane would never be the same. They will always remember Frederic's fury.
Good evening, I'm Mel Showers.
And I'm Roseanne Haven. Thanks for joining us for this News 5 special presentation. For the next hour, we'll share some of your incredible stories about Hurricane Frederic.
Stories of bravery, despair, fear, stories of a strong community, stories of people who bonded together to help their neighbors rebuild a city.
As the storm approached, no one knew exactly where Frederic would make landfall. The Gulf Coast braced for the worst. Here's Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals.
Hurricane Frederic was the most powerful hurricane to hit Mobile and the Bay Area since 1926. Now, at this time, 25 years ago, we didn't have Doppler radar, but we did have satellite, and we knew that it was coming. In fact, it was a long-track storm. It started in the eastern Atlantic on August 29th, went from a tropical depression to a tropical storm to a hurricane, and then it weakened as it crossed Cuba. Now, as it exited Cuba on September 10th, it quickly went from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 4 in the Gulf of Mexico. It approached Mobile, and as it hit Mobile late on the 12th, it weakened to a high Category 3. The eye of Frederic was about 20 to 25 miles across. The rainfall was just about average. What was unusual was not where it hit, but the amount of devastation it caused.
By Tuesday morning, stores were crowded with people buying food.
Well, I came just to buy a few things, but I went ahead and bought my groceries in the house here.
I see. Is it because of this hurricane?
Yes, it is.
Crowds formed outside of the few stores that still had batteries and flashlights.
To get some masking tape to tape up our windows.
Lamp oil and last-minute supplies, things that we didn't think of last night. So just get an early start and get battened down.
Business owners were taping windows and boarding up their stores. There was now a sense of urgency as Frederic loomed just a day away. Wednesday morning, then Governor Bob James ordered the evacuation of Gulf shores and other low-lying areas. The sky was darkening as families and friends sat in traffic jams heading away from the beaches.
I'm here because of the hurricane.
Why do you need to fill up?
I'm not going to fill up, but I'm going to get enough gas to get out of town if it gets bad enough.
Designated shelter areas began to fill up in Biola Battery, Pensacola, and Mobile. Hospitals sent home as many patients as possible. By late afternoon, police patrolled deserted streets. An eerie silence fell over an empty downtown Mobile as everyone anticipated the worst.
On the state of the storm game, we had the cirrus move in and then the wall of the storm. And things got exciting right away.
Frederic hit land full force the night of September 12th. The fury of the wind is what everyone remembers. In fact, it is rumored that a northeast flow forced 4 to 5 feet of water out of the bay.
Some people observed it, said that the battleship was sitting on the mud flats. I don't know about this, but we do know a lot of water went out. And then when this surge, the killer surge, came in, we were forecasting 15, 16 feet. It never materialized.
We knew that with the winds of 130 miles an hour, there was going to be some destruction, and of course there was.
The morning light made the devastation clear. Nothing was the same, and everyone had felt the impact.
You're watching Frederic's Fury on WKRG News 5. Frederic's Fury continues on WKRG News 5. Here's Mel Showers and Roseanne Haven.
Frederic's fury was devastating.
When daylight finally came after a very long night, people couldn't believe what they saw. There was destruction everywhere. City Hall was practically destroyed. Pecan orchards were flattened. Admiral Semmes' statue no longer stood watching over the bay. Ships and boats were tossed onto land from the water. Trees were knocked down like toothpicks. The ones left standing had no leaves. There was no electricity, no phones, and no water.
Just seeing the destruction that was done. The trees snapped off, no power in the area, there's high water. It was an awakening for me.
The first sound to split the silence was the buzzing of chainsaws. Trees were blocking any way in or out of homes and neighborhoods.
But we were really in a state of shock. You know, it just, all you could hear was chainsaws running everywhere. We had to saw our way out to get in here to the road.
The sickening smell of what seemed to be turpentine filled the air from the hundreds of fallen pines.
And in my neighborhood, once we turned off of Airport Boulevard heading to our home, the pine smell was overwhelming. And in our home, we lost 14 pines that fell just like jack straws around our home.
Gradually, some cars were able to maneuver through the maze of debris and trees. It took hours on foot or by car for people to get to their homes or business.
That's terrible, terrible. Even the house we were in up at some friends up North Mobile, an oak tree came down right on the front porch and everything, and we couldn't get out except the back doors. The only way we could get out. It was a big oak tree.
There was no electricity. That meant no lights, no electric stoves to cook on, no hot water, no refrigerators for food, and no air conditioning. Little did anyone know that it would be weeks before their electricity would be back on.
Definitely worse than anybody would anticipate. It was difficult getting back to work that morning. It went down Metropolis Road. They have a transmission line there, and the transmission poles were just bent over in all different directions. And when I saw that, I knew we were in big trouble.
Phone lines were dead. People scrambled to find a way to let their families know they were okay. The few homes that had phones that worked became a lifeline for everyone in the neighborhood. It would be a month before everyone had a dial tone.
We had phones, so a lot of people would come to our house to call friends and relatives to let them know that they were okay.
Grills were set up on streets and in backyards. Meat became the main course as freezers and refrigerators were emptied.
People would get together, you know, especially with it not being any electricity. It wasn't unusual for 10 or 15 people to have a fish fry or cook a pot of gumbo.
Ice became a precious commodity. From Pritchard to Pensacola, people stood in lines for 3 and 4 hours to get a block of ice. Tempers ran high.
What they expect you to do, stand single file and get ice? You supposed to stand there like that and say, thank you, sir, and walk off? No, you don't. No, you don't. I done lost $100 worth of meat because ain't no ice. I'm supposed to walk up here like a little wet dog and hold my bucket up? I won't do it.
People were desperate, helpless.
Some victims felt that others were profiting from their situation.
Is it expensive charging $5 for ice?
No, ma'am, it's real cheap.
Why do you say that?
If you know what I paid and how many hours and the truck expense, why, it's real bargain.
Well, don't you know many of these people are without electricity, food, gas, water, everything, and $5 is expensive to them?
Yes, ma'am, it sure is. I suppose if you wanted to $5.
So you don't feel like you're ripping them off?
I didn't say I was ripping them off, ma'am. You're the one that said that.
One local business tried to help out by selling ice as cheap as it could, or just giving it away.
They were selling ice for block size for I think 50 cents a bag or 50 cents a block, and which was really reasonable at the time compared to what everybody else was charging. And people were lined up everywhere trying to get it. For at least the past 10 years, I know that we've never charged anyone for ice during a hurricane season. We have when a hurricane hits, we have enough ice here.
Cars lined up for miles at gas stations.
How long have you been waiting in line here?
Approximately 2 hours.
2 hours. Has it been worth it?
Oh, I think so. We needed the gas real bad, so we have to wait in line.
Water had to be boiled, milk cartons were filled with water and given away.
We don't have water. My parents don't either.
None at all?
No.
I don't have any water. No water at all? No water at all. Does that concern you? Yes, it does concern me. What do you think how are you going to be taken care of? I really don't know unless I come down to a shelter place like this and get water.
There were no ATM machines and cash was scarce. In most homes, food was ruined, and families were living on canned goods. Food stamps were offered, but the first day they were handed out at the Dearborn Community Center, 5,000 people showed up. It was a disaster. What are you expecting to get here at this center on Dearborn Street?
Some food stamps. I'm so hungry, it's pitiful. We ain't got my groceries and everything gone, it's spoiled, and my windows is out, and I'm just hungry. My child got 6 children, and I don't know what to do. I don't know if they're going to give us these food stamps or not. We've been waiting for 4 o'clock in the morning.
So right now, we all need something. I've never had food stamps before, but
you need them.
Yeah, I need them now.
In some places, looting became rampant, and crowd control became a problem. The National Guard was called in to help.
As far as I'm concerned, it's one of the most heinous crimes of all, aside from murder and rape. These people come in and prey on people who are in distress. They take advantage of a disaster. And as far as I'm concerned, they ought to all be put in jail and throw the key away. And as far as I'm concerned, the price gougers are the worst criminals in the world.
A curfew was set from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. National Guard units and local police enforced martial law. They set up roadblocks after sundown each night.
They give you a pass or anything like that?
No, they said they didn't need one down there on at that Spring Hill. But Gregory, you know, they didn't. He said they didn't need one. Policeman right up there where they had.
As long as you are out at night during the curfew, you need some sort of badge or identification from your employer.
Frederic left chaos along the Gulf Coast. Shelters were full and communities were on edge. It was just the beginning.
You're watching Frederic's Fury on WKRG News 5. Frederic's Fury continues on WKRG News 5. Here's Mel Showers in Roseanne Haven.
As the hours passed, it became clear the destruction was widespread.
Other communities around Mobile were hit just as hard. Through it all, we met many heroes. Meteorologist Jerry Huff picks up our story.
At Providence Hospital, there were broken windows. Air conditioning units were blown from the roof onto the parking lot, crushing cars. Patients were moved into the hallways and doors were wired shut. Sister Mary Elizabeth Cullen will never forget that night 25 years ago.
We really wired all of the doors shut because you didn't want them being sucked in if that would occur. And all I can say is thank goodness that was done, because when the hurricane really did hit, which was, I don't remember the exact time, probably 1 o'clock, I think it was the tornadoes afterwards, also hit our entire north wing, which we had 6 floors in the north wing, and the windows all went out of the rooms, just like that, in an instant, just like that.
Sister Cullen was the vice president of nursing at Providence with the Sisters of Charity in 1979. Her training had prepared her to help the injured.
We've been seeing a lot of chainsaw injuries from people that have been, trying to clear their houses from the trees that have fallen, people that have been falling off of houses that they've been working. A lot of cuts and abrasions. We're having more car accidents than usual coming in because the traffic lights are all out.
She had no idea that when she was sent to Mobile, that a hurricane named Frederic would change her life.
And I'd always heard about hurricanes. I'm from Wisconsin, and I thought, I would never want to experience one. But you come through something like this again because of the people. And I guess it's a lifetime experience to say, I lived through Hurricane Frederic.
Carolyn Anderson has been a trauma nurse for over 20 years. Dealing with life-threatening situations is nothing new for her, but her skills were tested in the weeks that followed Frederic. It was all overwhelming.
And patients were just lined up. They were going out the emergency room almost to administration. It was just amazing. At that point, I think we had probably 85 people had came in. And it was more than we could handle. I thought, oh my God, how are we going to do this?
The nurses identified patients by labeling beds with their names. They piled medicine and equipment on carts, rolling them from patient to patient. Carolyn worked 14 straight days, seeing almost 100 patients on some of those days.
Kim Weems was a young social worker. She was in charge of over 300 people at the shelter at Providence Hospital. She remembers windows blowing out and lights crashing to the floor. Children were hysterical. For Kim Weems, it wasn't easy.
And I can remember thinking, I want to scream and cry too. I didn't want to be the one to calm anybody down. I really wanted to give in. But yeah, because that was frightening. At that point, you're thinking, well, this is worse than anything I've dealt with. I grew up here. You know, and growing up, it was the kind of thing where you thought, oh, great, we'll just lose the power, we'll sit around and watch it, we'll cook French fries on the gas stove, it'll be fun. That was not fun.
Baker High School had just been built, and Kay Brown was its new principal. She found out the morning of the storm that her school would be a shelter for over 2,000 people from Mobile, Bayou La Battery, and Dauphin Island.
By 11 o'clock, she was dismissing students and preparing teachers and cafeteria workers to get the school ready. She started to feel that she was in over her head.
My feelings were one of being overwhelmed, terribly frightened, terribly inadequate. I kept thinking, I thought I knew how to manage students and teachers and schools and buses and cafeteria and books and perhaps even discipline. But I don't know how to get a roof fixed. I don't know who even to call about the air conditioning.
The shelter was set up in an unfinished part of the school. It was a fortress-type building with no windows. At the height of the storm, huge multi-ton air conditioners were torn from the roof. Some of them fell into the parking lot, smashing into cars. Frederic peeled back the roof. It was completely destroyed.
It sounds inadequate, but my heart is broken. We're making plans to house our students so that school can start at the earliest possible time.
Looking back on that night, one phenomenon stays out in Kay's mind.
Though there are no windows at Baker, the front doors on both the first floor and the second floor have these huge plexiglass panes. I don't know, they're probably 12 by 12. And at the height of the storm, we could see them bulging inside. Those bulges are there still.
Across town, Deborah DeGuire looked out the window of her home and wondered if her family's business would still be standing.
When you got up that morning, I mean, you know, the sight that you saw was the closest thing you can describe it as a bomb had been dropped on Mobile. It was amazing. There was no leaves left on the trees. It was just, there's just not enough words. An eerie feeling when you went outside that morning.
The A&M Peanut Shop on Dauphin Street had made it through the night, but when DeGuire finally made her way to the store, nothing looked the same.
Bienville Square had a whole lot of limbs down, lots of limbs down. Dauphin Street itself, you know, there was glass everywhere from broken windows, a lot of pieces of awning, aluminum siding from the awnings that, you know, went out over them, all kind of destruction. It too, you'd look like you had been through a war.
Across the street at Naaman's, Virginia Naaman decided to stay at the store with her children during the storm.
That night, you know, we heard it, and I took my children. They were a little bit baby. I have 3 children, and come here, and I said, well, the house is okay. It'll be all right. Let me go to the store. We come here and spend the night, all night, upstairs in the mezzanine. And it was flooded here and water, and we got scared to death. And my children, I put them under my arms and all hug each other. But we survived, thanks God.
Grand Bay pecan farmer Leslie Hatchett had a wonderful crop that year. His 5,000 pecan trees were ready for harvest when Frederic made landfall.
Well, it kind of gives you a sick feeling, but you just got to forget about it and go ahead. Just be so thankful you're still alive.
Will it be easy to pick up and start over again?
No, it'll be hard.
The pecan farmers were hurt probably worse than anybody else. We were really in a state of shock.
The 350,000 pounds of pecans were gone, his land devastated. And 2 years later, he sold part of his property, trying to pay off the more than $2 million debt caused by the storm. In just a matter of hours, Frederic took away what he had worked for his entire life.
I mean, you grow up on it. You like to see a baby calf come and watch them grow, and you like to see your crops grow. It's kind of, you get it in your system.
The Central Presbyterian Church didn't weather the storm much better. There was more than $800,000 in damage. The beautiful stained glass windows were all destroyed. The stone crosses that topped the church steeples were now in the street.
I came by the church and saw what had happened here at Central, and it was devastation. The wind had blown in the window from the east side of the sanctuary, and then evidently the pressure built up inside such that it blew the other 3 walls of the sanctuary out.
The church members rallied together, donating money and their skills to rebuild. They used pictures to duplicate the destroyed stained glass windows, and special steel arched frames were placed around the new windows to protect them from future hurricanes. The church reopened its doors 2 years later.
Up in the rose window at the very top, there's a pair of hands that are looking up. And John Crowell, who was our pastor emeritus, who was the pastor before Tom Walker came in, and he looked up and he said, "Those hands are wrong." And this was after we had completed the construction. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, those were the hands of God coming down to you." And I said, "Well, now they are our hands praying to him that it won't happen again."
Bellingrath Gardens was helpless. There was nothing to protect the gardens from Frederic's fury.
You have to realize that Bellingrath Garden sits on a hill or knoll of land that's 30 foot above sea level. It's really the first hill of land from the Gulf of Mexico. And so the major hurricane winds were hitting us, particularly around the home, at 140, 150 miles an hour.
The roses were blown off the bushes, the magnolia trees lost their leaves first, and then the oaks. 75-year-old pines snapped in half like matchsticks.
Just total destruction everywhere. And you'd walk in the gardens and the landmarks were gone and you would get totally disoriented. It took us basically 3 hours to get from the building we were in up to the Bellingrath home in the center of the yard. And it took 3 days to clear a path wide enough so that the night watchman could bring his car out.
The once shady gardens were now exposed to the sun. The rose bushes had to be cut back, the chrysanthemums sold. But new trees were planted and the buildings repaired. The cleanup and repairs cost $6 million. Workers at Bellingrath tried to keep a positive attitude.
Well, you know, the great pruner in the sky, he has to come around once in a while and change things around a little bit and makes it more interesting.
Thomas Home and Auto opened its doors in 1971 and quickly became a fixture in Fairhope. Perry Thomas sold out of chainsaws and generators the day before Frederic came ashore. He closed up shop and went home to wait out the storm with his family.
Fortunately, the Lord spared us, and we came through it okay. It was very exciting, but yet it was scary.
The next day, Thomas saw the mess Frederic left behind and knew his customers would need help.
Well, over the weekend, I left and went to Birmingham and stayed up a straight 33 hours without any sleep. And one of my employees, we went and got the chainsaws.
His manual cash register worked just fine without electricity. And the chainsaws didn't stay on the shelves long.
Our business just flourished as a result of that because we were selling chainsaws and repairing them and taking care of all the people that came into town that had to do cleanup.
Frederic also caused a Mardi Gras mess. Warehouses full of floats were ripped apart.
It's just a terrible feeling because we had ridden down, and all the way down from home I had seen all this destruction, but when I got down and saw that our work that we'd worked so hard on was, well, gone.
At the Museum of Mobile, Mardi Gras history was floating in a foot of water.
And unfortunately, winds from the east coming in simply removed the roof, so that these beautiful kings and queens, actually there were only queens in here at the time, but they stood in ankle-deep water for 9 hours. There was a good bit of devastation. It's just that these lovely ladies got very wet.
At the time, Tatum worked at the Mobile Press-Register, just across the street from the museum. He volunteered his time using handheld hair dryers to dry the fur and velvet on the costumes.
They strung up clotheslines in the parking lot and also in the Rutherford carriage house at the back of the building. And these beautiful queens, or some very similar, were hung up to dry. And it was quite glamorous. You're just not used to seeing that sort of thing flapping in the breeze.
The Mystic Societies patched and painted the floats, and 16 of the 18 trains were saved and on display at the museum within days.
And I think the key word in Mardi Gras is fun. We do like to have fun. The storm affected that to an extent, but just made us more determined than ever to have a great Mardi Gras as soon as the season rolled around, and that's exactly what we did.
Frederic smashed into Dauphin Island with both its front and back walls, leaving the island cut off and its residents helpless.
The eye passed over the western half of Dauphin Island and took a rather sharp left turn and then immediately turned back to the right, but it went up the Mississippi-Alabama line. Dauphin Island, of course, got the brunt of the storm, and I think the highest wind recorded on the old Dauphin Island Bridge, which was destroyed, was a gust of 147 miles an hour.
Will Schroeder drove to the Dauphin Island Sea Lab for one last observation of the direction and speed of the wind and the water level.
We had turned around to leave, and as we went by where the ferry docks now come in, why the water level was rising very rapidly, and all of the debris that had congregated in Little Billy Goat Hole was beginning to move up onto the street. And as we passed in the truck, why it followed us up Bienville Boulevard. And I knew then that I was not going to be able to come back and take any more observations.
Equipment at the center was set up to measure wind speed. Schroeder turned the unit on and left the building.
And when we came back the next morning, it shows that the maximum wind speed had exceeded 120 knots. And at that point, the roof went off of the building and we lost all of the equipment.
The Dauphin Island Bridge had crumbled under the force of Frederic. The few residents who decided to ride out the storm barely escaped with their lives.
And the next day, when the bridge is gone and people's hurt, houses are sitting in the middle of the bay, islands flooded with water. I mean, you know, it was just one of the worst storms we've had here.
Ben Berger was one of the few who stayed behind. The ship and shore was his livelihood, and he wanted to save as much of it as he could. Frederic was much more than he bargained for.
I got a whole livelihood invested here. Looks like it's all going to go down the drain, but we're going to try. We're going to try to come back.
You have no intentions of giving up on it?
No, I don't have any intentions of giving up.
Back then, everything I had was tied up in this store. And I was trying to save what I could and keep it from getting wet. I didn't know the store was going to blow away. Well, just before daylight, all heck broke loose and the roof was gone. Then everything in the store just started like a mix master. I just couldn't believe what I saw. It was an awful mess and a terrible loss.
The ship and shore was rebuilt. 25 years later, the Bergers hand out flashlights to customers when the lights go out during a storm. The big oak desk that his dog Rufus hid under during Frederic still sits in his office. The most frightening moment?
The most frightening moment lasted probably 3 or 4 hours. Wasn't a moment, it was hours.
You're watching Frederic's Fury on WKRG News 5. Frederic's Fury continues on WKRG News 5. Here's Mel Showers in Roseanne Haven.
Hurricane Frederic caused a lot of uncertainty, but one thing the storm made crystal clear: the Gulf Coast was facing a major disaster.
Meteorologist John Nodar continues our story. He begins with a presidential visit to Mobile.
President Jimmy Carter flew in to survey the damage. On Friday, September 15th, he declared the central Gulf Coast a federal disaster area. Disaster relief money was approved, and that money meant the monumental task of rebuilding could begin.
The country will not forget you, those people who were not severely injured in this storm. We'll be partners with you in the days and weeks ahead, and I pray that this damage can be minimized and that your own lives might be restored very quickly.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was called in to conduct a disaster survey in Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama. But their main focus was on Alabama.
That was everything from raising sunken barges to removal of debris in 2 counties, Baldwin and Mobile counties, and to the clearing of some 17,000 acres of pecan groves in the 2 counties.
The Corps provided 1 million pounds of ice and inspected over 600 schools in 4 days. But the biggest task was removing all the debris.
The total when it was all over was 10 million cubic yards.
And how would you describe that in layman? How could we visualize that? What would that be like?
Well, the best way to visualize it is 1 square mile, and it's 10 feet deep.
9 months later, the job was finished at a cost of over $100 million. After clearing the streets, getting power back on was a top priority. Wes Kanishi of Alabama Power had only 1 day to prepare before Frederic hit.
That morning we realized it was coming this way. So we brought our crews back in, let them beef their trucks up, put all the material on them that they could find. Yeah, I just had a queasy feeling in my stomach.
The next day, over 300,000 customers were without electricity. 20 of the 21 big feeder transmission lines were down, and over 6,000 power poles were gone. Crews were brought in from all over the state and housed in the old municipal building. Feeding the more than 2,000 workers became a real problem.
They shipped it in some chicken from I don't know where. It was green by the time we got a hold of it, though, to eat, so that didn't turn out too good.
Because of Frederic, Alabama Power has a new plan, and workers say they're ready for the next big hurricane.
We developed a pretty elaborate plan. If we had another Frederic today, we'd probably bring in 5,000 to 8,000 people. We've got staging areas pre-assigned throughout the city to bring all these folks in. We've got corporate folks who have arranged plans to bring outside caterers in and local caterers to feed all these crews. So we got a lot better plan now than we had before.
Phone service was next on the list. Within 2 weeks, half of South Central Bell's 100,000 customers had a dial tone. The phone company brought in trailers with temporary phones. It was another 2 months before everyone had phone service. Over $23 million was spent to repair phone lines. The Department of Transportation sandbagged Government Boulevard and opened the tunnel floodgates. Frederic was on top of Mobile, and the Bankhead Tunnel was starting to fill with water.
And our Bankhead generator went down, so actually our people they were stationed at the Wallace Tunnel. As the eye passed over when it was calm, they went out to Bankhead and got the generator running so we could keep the pumps running so the tunnel wouldn't fill up with water. It got up on the floodgates 4 or 5 foot above the roadway.
Do you have any cars stuck down there?
There's a number of vehicles got trapped on the causeway, and all waiting to the last minute to evacuate.
Saving the causeway and the tunnels was the primary focus. At the time, no one realized or expected the Dauphin Island Bridge was being ripped apart.
It's hard to imagine the damage it can do. Just take the Dauphin Island Bridge. It was just unreal, the damage it done on that bridge. We thought wouldn't have any problems with it because it was a fairly new bridge and concrete structure and all, but we was surprised.
The DOT knew there wouldn't be any repair work. They would just have to replace the bridge. First, they raised the grade and added some new concrete protection along the causeway to Dauphin Island. They put in concrete walls and big rocks to reduce wave damage, and they improved the quality of the roadway. The height of the bridge was raised to 20 feet. The new bridge was built with an arch and without the lift span drawbridge that had to be raised for boats or barges.
We designed it for 200-mile-an-hour wind, and we also raised the bridge itself because most of the damage was done by the water and the waves. The tide surge, it actually lifted the concrete spans off and floated them off.
Traffic signals, freeway signs, state and federal highway cleanup, they were also the responsibility of the Department of Transportation.
We increased our wind load on all of our designs, our overhead signs, traffic signals, and everything. We increased our design criteria. So hopefully we could withstand more of a major hurricane without as much damage. But there's really, as far as the trees on the road and all that, that's just Mother Nature there. We can't increase the design speed on a tree.
3 years and $32 million later, the bridge was rebuilt. 6,000 cars a day use the Dauphin Island Bridge. 60,000 cars a day use the Wallace Tunnel. It was time for a new evacuation plan.
Another major effort we went through is having an evacuation plan, and where we have a good plan that we know that we can evacuate everybody from the area, and we have a plan to reverse laneage on I-65 that all traffic on both northbound and southbound will be going north to Montgomery.
Workers at Ingalls Shipyard in Pascagoula also braced for Frederic.
We did all things we could do to button the shipyard up. We had at least 2 ships that we sent to sea, which is the best place for ships to be during hurricanes. And then those ships that we could not put to sea, we put crews aboard them, shipyard workers that rowed the ships during a hurricane.
It was the first time Curtis Rabin had been on a ship at sea during a hurricane. He was the lead man over the engineering spaces aboard the Harry Hill. Water was rolling over the bow. The watertight hatches were closed.
I can remember at one time Captain Waller calling down and telling me to make sure that that we kept all the machinery online and all the generators, because we had rough seas, and to be very cautious about the machinery and keep it online, because we were definitely in some bad seas. The ship was taking heavy rolls, and some of the crew was a little bit shook up, and I was trying to keep them calm and stay calm myself too, but I just thank God everything went good.
Thomas Armstrong stayed at the dock. He tied down the ships and took up the slack when the tide would rise, but manpower wasn't a match for Frederick's strength.
Ship had got washed up on the dock, and that Thursday morning, the other craft come in. We tried to jack it off the dock, and we couldn't do nothing with it after we worked a while with it. And I think they got a tugboat out of Louisiana and pulled it off the dock.
All the ships survived the storm, but the shipyard sustained heavy damage.
The damage, of course, to our facilities is very extensive and probably could approach as much or perhaps more than $10 million.
Northrop Grumman bought Ingalls in 2001. Now the shipyard utilizes a heavy weather manual with specific guidelines to follow during hurricanes.
We have hurricane tie-downs now on ships, and I know that's better. And we we have a heavy weather team, and we start preparing as soon as we hear about one coming close by.
At Spring Hill and McGregor, a control center was set up in the Civil Defense Building. Bay Hayes had just become chairman of the Mobile County Commission, and in a crisis that put him in charge of civil defense.
It's where the staff was based there, and it was set up so when you activated, you brought in the city of Mobile, the fire department, you had radio communications there and all of that, so that's your command center.
They had a plan. They had rehearsed and tested it. Everyone was in place when the wind started to blow. Hayes' thoughts, though, kept drifting back to the water tower that was just 50 feet away from their building.
During that night, I thought, that water tower is sitting right there. If the wind knocks it down, every one of us will be dead before we can think about it. That much water hitting on top of this building.
The water tower survived the night. Hayes dreaded what he would find the next morning.
I'll have a hard time without getting emotional, because I've never been so afraid in my life. I didn't know what we were going to find. I literally said, let me get out of this with even 100 at that moment deaths, and I probably would have been grateful for it. I had no idea what to find.
What they did find was ruptured water mains and debris, lots of debris. Everyone on Bay Hayes' staff had a designated function and knew what they were supposed to do. The plan seemed to be working very well, except one thing.
All of the rehearsals and all of the plan was based on the idea that this would be a 24-hour or a kind of an exercise where you've got to handle an emergency. That didn't happen at Frederic. We were operating for 3 weeks.
There was no method to turn over control to someone else. After several days without sleep, Hayes decided to redo the plan and rotate employees. Contractors started pouring into Mobile. The city commissioners had to pass a special ordinance to crack down on fraud.
And we will give him a temporary permit that's good for 40 days that he can renew if we're still not over the shock of the hurricane.
Mobile City Hall had taken a beating. Frederic ripped the roof off and left extensive water damage. Part of the $15 million the federal government gave the city was used to repair the building.
We plan to restore it, from what I understand from the Board of Commissioners, just exactly the way it is. I'm talking about the exterior. And of course, on the inside, since there has been so many damages, we have to bring the building now up to city code standards.
Hayes says that in the weeks that followed, his team of over 50 people did a wonderful job.
I think the biggest lesson we learned was that
the plan that we have and the organization that we have will work. Some of the plans that we had were really just theoretical because we'd never really been able to test them under fire, and we found out that for the most part they worked.
We have been spared and we've been warned at the same time. Now it's time for every family to have a plan.
We learned a lot of lessons, really. We learned one quick lesson is the next time it appears that we're going to have a tornado or a hurricane, in Mobile, you make some advanced arrangements to be sure that you can feed and get water to your employees.
You saw a unification of the people in Mobile, and borrowing the philosophy of Red Cross, people helping people, it was evidenced every time you turn around.
You're watching Frederic's Fury on WKRG News 5. Frederic's Fury continues on WKRG News 5. Here's Mel Showers and Roseanne Haven.
There are many more stories from that night 25 years ago that can't be told in an hour.
But we all share the memories of Frederic's Fury.
A piece of metal logged in the side of a wood post stands as a monument to the awesome fury of Frederic. A fallen cross blown from the roof of a church is a congregation's memorial to nature's power. The new Dolphin Island Bridge has faced nature's forces many times since Frederic and still stands. A reminder that a community can weather any storm.
Bound to have us a fight.
Getting ready for Freddy. Oh, getting ready for Freddy. Better find your ever ready. Getting ready for Freddy.
Well, I used to think things would never get so bad. I thought Camille and Bob were the best that she had. But you should have felt the shivers running through this soul. It felt just like an acid trip out of control. Came up into my yard, 100 miles an hour, we were running just as hard.
Getting ready for Freddy. Getting ready for Freddy. Things are getting heady. Getting ready for Freddy.
Well, it rattled on the rafters and it shook on the walls. Stay away from windows and hide out in the halls.
Getting ready for Freddy. Getting ready for Freddy. Find your ever ready, getting ready for Freddy.
Well, we were told to evacuate, we really shouldn't stay, but we decided to ignore it and we stayed anyway. The roadie and the sound man sounded kind of